Hello everybody, welcome to number 27. Now if you're looking to buy a really top-end luxury car like this Bentley GT, the base price for a modern one of these is about £180,000. I paid just a tenth of that for my GT. I paid £18,000 for this car, but does that make it the ultimate bargain? Or ultimately, is it a bit of a disappointment? Today, I'm going to tell you how this one drives, whether it is worthy of the Bentley name, and crucially, also some of the downsides of buying a car like this. And at the end, we'll decide if it was a wise purchase or not. One of the things for me which marks out a true luxury car is the extreme low speed ride. So that's when you're crawling around, you know, literally under sort of 10 miles an hour or something like that, how the car reacts to bumps. Because most cars at those speeds, not necessarily unpleasant, but the suspension, the car isn't going fast enough for the suspension to do any work. So the car moves around with the bumps. True luxury cars I've been in, the Bentleys, some of the better S-Class Mercs with the air suspension, even at those speeds, they cushion you from any bumps. And this does exactly the same thing. One thing I have to say though is I'm not entirely sure that that is down to the luxury nature of the car as much as it is down to its weight. These things are pretty porky. They weigh a quite hefty, a quite substantial 2,000, pretty much 2.5 tons, 2,500 kilos, pretty much, give or take. So they are very heavy cars, and I think that's partly why you get that luxury feel at low speeds. All the same, this feels every inch like a luxury, like a really top-end special luxury car. For a start, that engine, when you start it up and when you're driving the car, to me it feels truly special. Some say that W12 isn't enough. It doesn't feel, it's not distinctive enough and it's a bit too loud. I think it sounds great. It gives the car a sort of a hidden sense, well not a hidden, it gives it a sense of menace, of hidden power that's sort of waiting to spring. One thing I will say that is not perfect for me is the throttle response in some settings. So of course it has to have a level of, it has to be measurable at lower speeds when you're trying to maneuver and park the car. I think they should be able to have tuned that so that when you're actually driving or pulling out of junctions, it's a little bit snappier, just because there's too much throttle travel right at the bottom of the throttle. I mean, it's not terrible, but it doesn't feel right. Now, apparently peak torque on this engine is at 1600 RPM, so 550 horsepower. Can't remember the torque figure off my head, but it's a big torque figure, and you can feel it. So in terms of propulsion, this is absolutely, to me, it doesn't let it down at all. We're going to do a pull in a minute as well and see, in terms of pure performance, how fast it is as well, because they are supposed to be fairly nippy. But in everyday driving, the engine is smooth, it's muscular, it sounds great. 10 points. And even on this cheaper car, it works, you know, it sounds good. I couldn't hope for anything else. The one bad thing, which we have to criticize, I suppose, is the fuel consumption is truly horrific on this. And I think it's worse than my Ferrari 308, which, yes, has a much smaller engine, weighs less, but it's from the mid-70s. If you're driving around on sort of in the countryside here in the UK, so not much traffic, 50 to 60 mile an hour roads, you can expect about 17 miles to the gallon. If you're in town, it would surely go down to 12 or even less. And if you put your foot down again below, you know, it'll go into single figures for sure. But if you're getting one of these as a car for, you know, for special occasions, that's not going to make a massive impact. I've gone on to this sort of, what is this, a B&A road, just to do, I'm going to come out of a junction, we'll do a full throttle pull. It is raining, but the beauty about the GT is that it is four-wheel drive and quite capable chassis, so I'm not actually too worried about that. Afterwards, we'll go down the famous road, most of you know as Harry's Road, and we'll take it where it shouldn't really be taken, and we'll see how it does on a twisty, windy, bumpy road of that type. Foot to the floor. So secure in the way it pulls. The ground is really slimy, but it just goes and then it keeps going. The gearbox, super smooth, silky smooth. Even at full throttle like that, you can't really feel the changes too much. So again, can't really fault the power unit. It is a fast car. How though is it going to handle a little bit of brisk, oh no, someone's about to turn in, a bit of brisk driving on this road? Yeah, just pipped him to the post, thank God for that. So first of all, let's just keep it in comfort, because one of the things that I think I read in some of the early reviews when these came out, they were largely favourable, but one of the things they mentioned is that the ride wasn't quite right. As I said, the very, very low speed ride is excellent. When you speed up, I find it a little bit more fidgety than you would expect from a car like this. And I'll tell you why later. It has to do with what I think Volkswagen were trying to achieve. But it is worth noting that whilst in no way unpleasant, the ride isn't perfect. Okay, now I'm gonna slap it into the sportiest setting. Comfort. Okay, sport. And again, we've done this, and it's not like it makes it unbearable now and that it's moving all over the place. In a way, on a road like this, it's actually more comfortable than on comfort, because the car isn't pitching and rolling about as much. You get a little bit more of the smaller vibrations coming through. It turns much more sharply, much more precisely, because you don't get that sort of wallowing, and it keeps it pretty flat, especially on these sort of wide sweepers. It's, to be honest, pretty impressive. The one thing is the steering. It's like treacle just off center. So once you go into the corner and you load it up, it feels much better. But off the straight ahead, not the nicest feeling steering system. Also, I mean, you know, it'll go around the corners. I need new wipers. It'll go around these corners pretty quick, considering how, you know, how heavy this thing is. It actually handles remarkably well. It's not a car that you're going to enjoy taking to the limit, but for going from A to B, it is certainly fast enough. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a bit of a mess though when it comes to that really technical downhill then uphill S. So we'll chuck it in there and see what it does. Should probably lock it into gear, but I haven't got round to that. So let's just see how it does with the gearbox as it is, and we'll go back the other way as well. So down here, pretty tidy, not amazing speeds. This left-hander is so tight and it grips. Wow. It grips a lot harder than I thought it would. Didn't understeer even. Okay, next pass. We'll put a little bit more welly into it. Okay, and back the other way. Gets a little bit rough actually at the top, so I'd say past 5.5, the engine roughens up a little bit. Right, I'm going to put it there, go back into, okay, third gear, and let's see how it behaves now. The back end felt a tiny bit light coming out that off-camber left-hander, but not in any way like it was going to do anything. You could feel the front just pulling it forward. I think this four-wheel drive system is quite biased towards the front, so it will do that. It's not really, I don't think it's very easy to get the tail out. I think it is possible to get a little bit of movement, but it didn't do it there. It was such a departure for Bentley. It was the first of the VW generation. VW obviously wanted and had to do something different from the past. They wanted to sell higher numbers. They needed a wider audience. They needed a younger audience. So they wanted a car which had a little bit of sporting intent, plus that differentiates it from Rolls-Royce. So I think that goes back to the fact that the ride tends to be a bit firmer sometimes than you're expecting, and that this handles so much better than I would ever have thought possible for such a big car. They kind of prioritized, I think, the driving dynamics, and I mean, there's no other Bentley that went before it that drives as well as this thing on a road like this. And they did that because it had to appeal to a younger audience. In that, they succeeded completely. When it comes to buying a car like this now, though, I know the modern ones are actually a lot better. I'm going to be doing a test comparing this to one of the modern ones. But in terms of they have really refined out a lot of these issues whilst keeping the same sort of capabilities. But with this one, there's a little bit of a compromise, because I think at this stage in life, you're not going to buy one of these to throw it down the road. And it would just have benefited from a slightly softer suspension setup, in my view. And there are some other areas where the GT of this vintage is a little bit suboptimal, I would say. And another one is NVH, so the sort of noise. You get quite a lot of tyre noise coming through. Now, this one, I think they all do. It's double glazed. Wind noise isn't bad. Again, I wouldn't say it's up to the standards of a car of this kind and this price. But can we still call it a Bentley, knowing that it's such a radical departure from everything that's gone before? Well, look, I think we can agree it is devastatingly capable. It is a massive amount of money. Massive amount of money? It's a massive amount of car for the money. And yes, it does come with some risks, as any expensive car which is now cheap. But if you buy it carefully, you buy a good one, I would thoroughly encourage you to go for one of these. I think they are, you know, like a bargain of the century in many ways. So we're ending on a high for today, but I'm sure that this Bentley will throw some surprises at me. I'm taking it to Bentley for a service, which is also where I'm going to do the test against the more modern, the current GT. And I've got to sort out this TPMS issue as well, which I believe is probably likely, I'm hoping, is just one of the sensors in the wheels, although they are all reading, so I get the readings from them, which is why it's odd that it's doing it. But sometimes if the battery's low, it can still set it off. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. It is hugely appreciated. And really look forward to seeing you for the next video. Keep an eye out for when the new one on this comes out.